thanks to Rebana and her team for joining us here. We're so thrilled to be able to have representatives from various aspects of filmmaking present to discuss the film. Congratulations on a beautiful film.
Thank you.
The film is so layered with so many voices across a cross-section of women. I think my very first question was before I had seen the film, I thought it was going to be much more about Mumbai. But when I saw the film, I thought how intelligently it was using the ladies' compartment as a microcosm of urban Indian society to look at a whole range of women talking about, and through just one question of what makes them angry, you're talking about a whole set of emotions on women's desires and ambitions. So I think the very first question is, how did you decide to locate it in this spatial unit of the Mumbai local?
I think the idea for the film was coming from, I guess it grew from that time when we were talking about women's voices a lot. There was a Me Too movement, and suddenly women's voices had an amplification that it sort of didn't have before. And it was just by accident that I found an old picture I had taken of the ladies' compartment. And that's when I thought, oh, okay, this could be interesting to situate a film in there. So I did a recce, and I had my camera, and I just thought, okay, let's see what happens if I take my camera out. And I started filming fragments, just hands and feet and stuff. And immediately there were women telling me things they wanted to share. So I thought, okay, so there is a film here. And then the more I thought about it, the more it felt like this would be an extremely exciting idea, because it's such a dynamic space. It gives you so much. Like you can make such a, there's so many layers you can add to the film just because of the space. The light changes, the movement, and all of that stuff. So I guess that's how I came to it. Yeah.
But I would imagine it's also a very challenging space to make a film. I mean, not looking even at movement or sound, but even how do you decide who is it that you're going to speak to? You have maybe, 30 or 50, at the most 1 hour, depending on which station they're getting on and where they're getting off. How did you decide who you're going to speak to? And
often we did it quite organically. So sometimes we would get in and then we would set up, and the person sitting opposite us, we would ask, would you mind if doing an interview? And they said yes. We did an interview with them. Sometimes I passed around this poem, and I asked people, would you mind reading it out loud? So some people read it and said, no, not for me, pass it on. So sometimes it passed around like that, and then one person said, yes, I want to read it. And then from there, that's like a little key, that opens up. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to then ask actually much. The poem itself is doing some kind of stimulation that lets the women start talking about things that if I had directly asked, maybe they would just become defensive and say, no, there's no issue. Everything is fine. So that was one way. And sometimes we just approached people who we thought felt interesting just for I don't think we were making a big choice or anything. It was just like, okay, who, maybe you, we ask you. And if you said yes, then we would.
so I was quite struck by how honest people were and how much they trusted you. And maybe this poem by Kamla Bhasin was that thing that, unlocked that. What was interesting for me is you asked a woman what makes you angry, and it was invariably boiling down to patriarchy, which I'm not surprised. But I think I was surprised by how many people saw the institution of marriage as being repressive. There was nothing romantic about it. And it was more, not so much with the lower classes who kind of accepted marriage and were looking at carving a space of freedom and desires within that. But the slightly more middle class people, I think for whom they felt that if it's only by being on the fringes of society can we explore our freedom. So were there similar insights, or was this something that struck you as well?
In general, I think the most often what you find were women who said, yeah, of course there's problems, but I'm also okay with it, and then continuing to live that life and so on. But I think that's where I went in, really wanting to know, because I'm sure it makes you angry, the stuff that you have to deal with on a daily basis. which you accept, but still, I'm sure it still makes you angry. And I know that I've been angry, so I was really wondering, what do you do with your anger then? What is that, what are you doing? It was just a curiosity from my side. And of course, there were other questions also. It wasn't just what makes you angry. There was other kinds of questions also. When was the last time you were afraid, or what makes you uncomfortable, or I don't know, different types of questions. But in the end, with the edit, I felt like this was the actual, like, the pulse of the film. Yeah.
Before we move into specific questions, do you want to? I'm sure you thought about having an all-women crew, and what was it like for both of you being as part of this film? And of course, I mean, I don't even want to get into how difficult it must have been to be recording sound in a train, or for you where you have to act so quickly on your feet. You know, you have to get the focus right, and you have to mean, and it's constantly also moving. So many places you see that shift constantly happening, and yet, people are opening up and talking to you. So, Navya, do you want to say something about your experience of doing sound?
Yeah, it was challenging, but what made it really nice was that the team was really understanding of the problem of it, as well as the women. Like, they were all like, okay, you need so much space to, take care of your gear. We'll shift over for you. Idhar aa jao, udhar aa jao. So it was really nice to be in that environment, and it was also quite strenuous on the body because it is so, and the equipment's heavy. But somehow it felt okay to kind of be doing that because of the support of other people. And also, like, I feel the way that we approached how to film was very observational. So even when we sat and we were like, okay, now we're going to shoot, I never felt scattered. I never felt, okay, now I got to pick this up and I got to pick that up. It was always like, okay, now we are going to situate ourselves here, see what happens, and whatever happens will happen. So I felt quite composed through the process of making, and I think that was a sort of team quality that we built.
Milan?
Yeah, I think the best part of working on this film, which kind of revealed itself while we were making it, because Rebana and I were together for the 21 days, 21 to 30 days, 30 days on the train. Was the kind of, I mean, we were also ladies on the train getting used to each other while also, filming the women over there. So we would be reacting to these conversations which were happening with the women, So the stories would be working in both of our minds, So we would get triggered when we'd see something which would actually relate to a lady who we had a conversation with. So that way, I think that without really knowing each other closely, just as people working together, we kind of reached a sort of communication which was non-verbal, and I really appreciate also this freedom of observation, which came with this project, which just actually allowed you to watch the train itself and watch the women just do actions, which otherwise we don't really get space to watch because people are quite impatient with women in general. So I really enjoyed the luxury of being and watching women, and staying on them even when they didn't feel like, like even after the dialogues were over, just staying with them would allow them to like continue, So that way, that was one thing about the working thing, but camera-wise, since there was only one camera, and there was moving ground and moving light and fluctuating, we were shooting this in April. So it was an every day. So that itself was like a new experience where you don't have any control over location or you don't have any crew and you have no gear basically to support it. So we did not, one thing that we had decided also was we are not going to invade people's privacy without consent. We have to take consent from everybody. I'm from that same idea. So we did not use any lenses, which, the zoom lenses, to shoot them without consent, to invade their privacy. So we actually used to go close, and it gets tougher when you're doing manual close like that. We had only prime lenses. And yeah, if you've been in Bombay in the trains, it's quite a a scenario which has its own, vibration as well as like its pressure points. So that was really new for us also to be functional and operating. So we had to kind of build a sync between,
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning we had these moments when we
Yeah.
were a little bit like, I'm sitting here, we're interviewing someone here, but camera person is there, and then, like the angle is wrong. And so we had to figure that out. It took some time, but
yeah, and
then
we had
it
to
was-
trust each other also because there was no chance sometimes. Yes, because there's no chance sometimes you would just get drifted away because of the crowd itself, because the crowd would push through. So that was nice and interesting. We just had to stay in sync.
As a filmmaker myself, I really appreciated how there are a lot of sections of observational interspersed with the talking, and how much, let's call them silent characters, like the chiku seller, the jasmine seller, the woman putting on makeup, or what they're looking at in their phone. So Rebana, this question to you is as editor. You're also editor on the film. And there's constant rhythm of the moving train. So I would say that that's one rhythm that's guiding you on how you're going to be editing. But did you have a sense of how you wanted to tell this story, intersperse the narratives? Is there more of Bombay you would have liked to put in or not put in? I mean, just, I'm interested in some of this process and share the choices you would have made.
So we had 75 hours of material, which, I mean, it was a good amount. And so for me to edit the film myself, I started by transcribing it all. I wrote everything down in text format, so I have like a 300-page document as well. And then I went through that, and by going through that, I could find the visuals. Like somehow when you read it and then you see it, and you're like, okay, this image is powerful on its own, for me at least. And so that was one way of selection, and then creating a few timelines and working with different types of material. Originally, the film was a lot slower, actually. Now, when I watch it, I find it, in a way, it's a bit faster. I mean, the slower version would have had a different feeling, but maybe because I've seen it many times, so it feels
But
like.
did you feel the train tempo also added to the tempo of the edit?
Yes, sure. At first, with these really slow passages, I felt like you could really get into the train. You would get a feeling of being in it. And I think it's an immersive feeling. So people would enjoy that, I would think. But that's another film now, which didn't happen. It's still sort of slow, I would say. But at the same time, I wonder what that could have been. But definitely the rhythms of the train, like there's these parts where it's almost like a song, right? And also the music I used in a way that kind of gave that musical quality to it. So it would just take you out a little bit more, not too much, and it wasn't like the music was the train. The train itself was carrying you. So.
We'll come back to maybe more questions on film form, but I'd like to open it up for burning audience questions.
Hi, that was a good film. I want to know how many people you interviewed and how many you selected. I could see different demographics. There was a girl, a daughter, wife, and an old lady. So in total, how many did you interview?
I think in total we had about 34 interviews, and in the end there are about 13 in the film. And the selection of them in the film came also from what they talked about and how they talked about it. I didn't specifically think about it in terms of demographic, but in terms of what they had to say. So that was the guiding principle behind choosing the women. And some of the women had such wonderful characters and things they said, the ways they said it. It was obvious that, this one's definitely going in there.
There's a question in front. Okay.
It's a nice film, thank you. What I found was among the working women, the vendors, I didn't see any interview with them. And particularly the Kohli women, the fish sellers who travel a lot. So it would have been at least interesting to see whether they can speak something about it, what you have been interviewing.
Yeah, with the vendors, I think it was a conscious choice also because what they do in the trains is not technically legal. So you could feel that they were a little bit suspicious of us, of being inside the frame. So sometimes, so that's why also we kept a distance and not going in too close with that because I didn't want to jeopardize anyone's livelihood or put them in that position. And the fisher women, I think they travel by another compartment. I don't think they bring the fish into the ladies' compartments. I think there's a separate section for them, for goods. So you don't end up seeing them in the ladies' compartments. Yeah.
I also feel that they kind of became our friends because we would see them every day, you know. So it was like they were doing their work and we were doing our work. So they'd be like, you have reached, you know. So that's also how we got permission to just be so close to them without them looking uncomfortable or anything.
Yeah, hi. First of all, I just wanted to say your movie was wonderful. I think I had an emotional reaction to so many of the conversations that I think I was witnessing. I feel like I could have watched 2 more hours of you guys just talking to them. So if you ever put out the other footage, please think about uploading it. I'm a legal researcher. I study cities actually from a feminist perspective. So actually I felt like I saw Mumbai because I couldn't imagine these women to be from any other city than Mumbai. But the question I kind of wanted to ask you guys is, how did this experience change you? Because one thing is, I'm always thinking in terms of where do women congregate in the city? And today I was like, yeah, of course they congregate in ladies' compartments. They talk to each other. So I was wondering if there were experiences you had where your conversations spurred, say, group conversations. In terms of how did that, I mean, what happened to you after a month of these? Yeah, if you guys could talk about that.
I mean, for me, I stayed with this material for almost 4 years, or like 3 years at least, because I was editing it and so on. And in the end, I feel so close to those women, like everyone who I interviewed and I put into the film or didn't put also. I feel like I know them really well. So when I met some of the protagonists recently in the screening in Mumbai, the closeness I feel towards them is much bigger than what they would feel towards me. So I think that was one of those things, is really getting into into the mind space of another person, and so many women. And I think for me, I took away a lot of personal lessons on how to live life or how to understand life, and there was something about that. And I think when we talk about feminism, there's sometimes also a very strong Western feminism that also takes over, and which may not fit to things here. So my curiosity was also from there, of like, okay, so what do you do with your anger, and how are we supposed to navigate this space? Which is, not, I mean, I'm not saying Western feminism is wrong, but I'm saying that, yeah, in some ways it doesn't fit. So how do we figure out our own? Or that was my place, my space of understanding in the film.
For me, it changes every time I watch the film, and I feel I haven't even now understood what I've taken from it completely. At the age I'm at, and I'm from Jaipur, I work in Bangalore, this was shot in Bombay. So it's very different to switch context, tradition, culture. I come from a certain family, I'm earning my own livelihood in my own ways. I feel really emotional every time I watch it, and I feel inspired by so many of the women. Like the 23-year-old, like I felt she was so clear about her opinion. Can I be like her? Like when will I have that clarity? Because I have no idea what I'm doing half the time, and I'm just trying to figure just as they are. So I'm inspired each time, and I feel like really emotional every time I watch it, and I smile at the same jokes again and again. And I'm like, damn, I wish I knew how to navigate life looking at these women. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I shot and I knew how much time I spent with shooting these women, basically, and how, what kind of conditions there were, and when they gave me this permission to actually be with them, I actually could not stop thinking about them, especially during the pandemic, you know, because We had just shot it, and then the pandemic came, and these same trains were not running. And I really couldn't stop thinking about just this, actually. What are these women doing when it's so crucial, this lifeline of the train? And where are they right now? And what is going to happen with this? And it was a very weird time in India as well, because there was so much censorship, you know. And I was really happy that the finishing of this film was happening in Germany, you know, because it felt like there was a different life going on there, where there were, you know, different possibilities. The idea of cinema was still living, you know. So I was really excited when the stories of these women who are not on that train anymore, like the train is not running during the pandemic, was getting released, you know, with the help of like people who are not Indian, you know, and mixed down by them and supported observational, you know, like with luxury, you know, of listening. So I think that is something that I will take away. And every time I watch this film, I try and remind myself about that. Because it seems that the messages that we don't really take very seriously in our near proximity actually travel so far, you know, and reach so many people, because other people from different contexts can actually relate to lives lived over here, you know. So that idea during the pandemic and the isolation, as well as like these women and what must have happened to them now, and how their stories are still reaching people, that is really inspiring, you know. For me, I think, yeah.
I have a related question, related to what both of you said. So I know this film was finished in Germany, and you've had a lot of international screenings of the film. And I think as women living in India, we internalize a lot of patriarchy, a lot of repression. I think I don't ask as many questions as somebody else from a foreign audience watching it. And at the same time, people have ideas of India being extremely conservative and extremely backward, right? And then you see these very articulate women in this train. So, you know, just to share did you get a lot of that kind of dichotomy?
Yeah, for sure. I think what you see when you read the news about India is, okay, rape case, it's unsafe. And of course, that's true. But at the same time, there is this strength, there is this confidence, there is this brazenness and like intense attitude, which, I don't know, that was, I mean, I think I got a little bit frustrated of that view as well on India. So it was partly that also pushed me into making a film where I was looking at these women's voices in this way. I mean, I was also careful to not make it seem like, yeah, it's only all perfect and everything. So it's a complex topic. You have to approach it in a nuanced way, otherwise you can end up, saying something really strange. Or,
were people surprised to see the women?
Yeah, I think a lot of them find it amazing how cool they are and how confident they are and so on. And I think overall, people tend to feel, there is a universal sense of inspiration that women also feel anywhere else as well. Because a lot of women come up to me after screenings and saying, wow, that was really great. And I was like, okay, I'm happy that it translates like that. So it doesn't stop at a border somehow.
Sorry, you had a question.
Hi, congratulations on a delightful film. Before I ask my question, I also just want to say lovely sound design. Sound is more than half the film. I'm a filmmaker myself, and I'm very thrilled to hear that you're in Bangalore. Good to know sound people in Bangalore. My question is, throughout the film there was the overarching theme is that of anger, strength, which I think is an indictment of why should people have to be so strong is always a question when there are strong people shown. Was there any insight or opinions expressed about what brought people delight, just joy of whatever kind, so the silly, indulgent stuff, the deeper happiness kind of stuff, and anything that came out of these conversations? I'm off the top of my head from the film, I'm not able to point out any such moments, but if there was any.
You mean if you want to know if there were moments of joy, or if the women were talking about their joy?
Yes, the latter, yeah.
Yeah, I think there might have been some questions in that area. I think for me, for example, how the girl who talks about her thesis, talking about Gone Girl, I mean, for me, that's a moment of joy, pure joy. That's, I mean, and the and the girl who punched her brother, like, I mean, I mean, for me, those are, you can see the glee on their faces. So I felt like that was the joy that I was interested in, and I'm sure there are other moments of joy, and that would be another film maybe. But yeah, and yeah, that's.
Congratulations, it was a nice film. I like the editing very much actually. You created a moment within the moment. That was very wonderful actually. Normally we go by moments and rhythm, but here there was a moment and within there was a moment. I just wanted to understand, why did you stop at 79 minutes?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I had a 2 hour, 10-minute cut in the beginning. And then, yeah, I don't know. I think the rhythms took over, and kind of trying to find the right way to move through the stories and not be too much. Because at some point, I think people's attention spans, you could lose it as well. And I wasn't sure. I think there could have been a slower film, but maybe I wasn't strong in terms of just saying, no, it's going to be a slow film. I think that would have been another decision. But I didn't choose it because I felt like there are so many stories I want to tell, but also I can't make it too long. And for example, the lady who in the end comes in and says, this lady must be mad, the one who wrote the poem. I mean, she was an amazing character. We had an interview with her just before that, actually, and she didn't read the poem out loud. I read it to her, and she responded to it. And her response was like how she responded there. And in the beginning, her interview was also there. But at some point, it became clear that, okay, in a way, it's more effective when she sort of just intervenes rather than, hearing from her another interview and so on. So like that thing started getting out, and the powerlifter, there was a lot of her inside. Like she talked about how she wanted a Hulk tattoo on her arm, which her mom didn't let her get. And, I mean, she talks about that, I guess. And so there was a lot of stuff from her as well that I took out in the end because it was too much of her, for example. And so that's how it kind of became shorter, and then we settled on the 79 minutes. Yeah, black and white was because two reasons. One is the complexity of the space. There's so much change happening there. It's so chaotic. Light changes, movement, people coming in and out. So in a way to distill the essence of the space. And the second reason because I was in Germany, I'm making the film from there with funding from there. So I mean, when you talk about India, it's very colorful, very colorful. And I thought, okay, then we take out the color, and then maybe you can, interact with it on a more universal level. So that was the... Yeah.
I've been told I can have one last question.
Hi. On the lines of what he asked, even though there were stories of joy and happiness, I observed that the tone of the questions that were asked, what makes you angry, what are you afraid of, who was the last person you punched, and I didn't see a question which were on the lines of what makes you happy, what do you enjoy doing. So what I'm trying to ask is, what was the intention? What were you trying to get out of these women? Was it like very open-ended? Was there a structure as to, these are the boxes we need to tick, these are the experiences we need to record? And also on the lines of that, have you all stayed in Mumbai for a while, or are any of y'all localites? So was there a local lens of, this is what happens in the local train and we need to get this if we are making a film in the local? Or how open-ended was it?
So I'm... Ooh. Sorry. So I'm from Mumbai. I was born and brought up there, and I have traveled in the trains as a student while I was working and so on. So I know that space intrinsically. And so it's sort of like, it was like reliving a memory in some ways. And then also to see what is it like now. And in terms of asking whether they had, I think your question was, did I ask them about happy moments? I think there were many different kinds of questions, and it was sort of open-ended, because my process is also, I tend to stay open in the beginning. It's almost like I don't know what my film is about. But of course I do, because I have to write a treatment and I have to explain to people what the film is and get funding and so on. So you have to explain a lot, but I like to have this openness. And in that openness, I had a few questions. And one of them was, what makes you angry? Because for me personally, I have felt so much anger in my life in terms of the patriarchy, in terms of many these kind of spaces. And also women's anger is often shamed as well. Because if you are angry, then you're also, you can be hysterical, you're treated in a certain way, or, like these kinds of things I have experienced myself. And then I was curious. So what do you do with your anger? So that was where I came from on that question. And the other questions sort of took a back seat in the end. And the punching question, it came from her revealing the story about punching. She was talking about sexual harassment and about punching someone, or that you should just punch them, not feel afraid. And so then I asked her, so who did you punch last? And then there was this nice moment. But yeah, that part had to be taken out because, yeah.
I also think that the joy of being given the space to speak itself is something that you can kind of see in the faces, in how they go into the elaboration, So maybe the question, and that's something that we saw also, it was the same question being asked, but the reactions of each person and how they opened up and released, that was very joyful, for us.
I think it's actually the strength of the film is that you see it's almost like a collection of so many people opening up about what gets them most perturbed, and it all boils down to, controlling of freedoms or not being able to explore your full potential in many, many different ways. And I think that's what each viewer goes on that journey also of their own.
No, and I think also this thing of joyfulness and happiness, I feel like women have to do that anyway. We're constantly performing this, so I don't want to know what makes you happy, actually, because it's sort of like, tell me what makes you angry, because that's somehow, it'll get me to what makes you happy. Yeah.
On that note, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, BIC, Sneha, Saravana, Lekha, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you guys as well. And thank you.